And welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Tuesday, July 13th. I'm your host for today's program, Paul DeMain. Many of the stories read here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com. Here are the news stories for the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. The widow of a well-known potter was sentenced July 7th to 6 months of home confinement on convictions for trafficking in ancient Indian artifacts. A second defendant got probation for the same sales. Brent Bullock and Tammy Shumway were among more than 24 people rounded up last summer on felony charges from the largest ever federal sting in the artifacts trade. Bullock offered ceramic figurines and other artifacts taken from public lands, and Shumway arranged their sale to a government informant for a 10% commission. The defendant and their lawyers said this in federal court in Salt Lake City last week. Shumway is the widow of the notorious Earl K. Shumway of Moa, who in the 1980s and 1990s bragged about ransacking thousands of sites, including graves in southern Utah. He said, "Around here, it's not a crime, it's a way of life." Earl Shumway was eventually convicted and sentenced in 1995 to more than 6 years in jail. He passed away of cancer after his release. The federal sting that led to Bullock and Tammy Shumway's arrest spanned Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, and Utah. 4 others pled guilty earlier and were given probation. On July 6, 76-year-old Dale Lyman received 5 years probation for trafficking in prehistoric Clovis spear point as well. Sentencing is scheduled September 13th for a Fort Pierre man who pled guilty in federal court to traffic in archaeological resources. 61-year-old Scott Mattinson faces a maximum prison sentence of 5 years. He was among 5 men charged in a federal indictment with illegal taking and trading of American Indian artifacts and old military items dug up on public lands and Indian land along the Missouri River. The other 4 defendants also pled guilty in agreements with prosecutors. A lengthy legal battle between Kentucky and Ohio over who owns a rock pulled from the Ohio River has officially come to a close. A document filed last week in federal court in Ashland dismissed the case based on an agreement reached during April that required the 8-ton boulder be returned to Kentucky from Ohio. For generations, Indian Head Rock jutted out of the water on the Kentucky side of the Ohio River. It served as a navigation marker for boaters and surface for carvings of initials, names, and a crude face. An expedition of Ohioans moved the rock to Portsmouth, Ohio 3 years ago. The National Labor Relations Board has ordered a union election at the Foxwoods Resort Casino to the dismay of the Pequot-run operation. The United Food and Commercial Workers wants to represent about 360 bartenders, beverage servers, and others at the casino in eastern Connecticut, but the casino maintained that Mashantucket Pequot labor relations law should apply. A date for an election has not yet been set. On July 7th, the ruling was similar to an earlier NLRB decision in favor of the United Auto Workers, which represents nearly 3,000 table game dealers at Foxwoods. But in the current case, Foxwoods and the union had agreed to negotiate a contract that recognizes Pequot tribal law. A measure allowing Native Hawaiians to form their own government could come to a vote in the U.S. Senate this month following a deal struck with Hawaii's Republican governor. Governor Linda Lingle announced that she would support the bill after it was changed to clarify that a future Hawaiian government wouldn't provide immunity from the state's laws unless Congress agrees following negotiations. Native Hawaiians are the last remaining indigenous people in the United States that haven't been allowed to establish their own government, a right already extended to Alaska Natives and Native American tribes. Lingle's backing will be important in getting votes from Republican senators, some of whom have seen it as a race-based discrimination. A lawyer representing snowmaking opponents has asked a judge to temporarily prohibit construction at that Arizona Snowbowl ski resort. Attorney Howard Schenker filed a request for a temporary restraining order on July 6 with the U.S. District Court judge. The action comes after the July 2nd decision by the U.S. Department of Agriculture that allows snowmaking and related construction on the San Francisco peaks, and approval that becomes effective next week. Schenker's tribal clients failed to prevail in court in arguing that making snow with reclaimed wastewater on the sacred San Francisco peaks violated their religious freedom. Schenker has another court hearing next week with new plaintiffs to contend the potential health and safety risk of using reclaimed wastewater on ski slopes. And we've not been able to get an update on the status of the Iroquois national lacrosse team, but it appears that as of Tuesday afternoon on July 13th, they're still stuck in the United States. We'll let you know if we hear anything otherwise. And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to say miigwech for joining with us. Come back again soon.